I'll just start by introducing from my far right, we are hosting this morning Sam Otieno, the Director, Advocacy and Partnerships at Zizi Africa. Asante for creating time. We have with us Grace Nyongesa, the Chairperson, Universities and Academic Staff Union WASU. We also have with us Mheshimiwa John Nyutu, Senator Muranga, who chairs the Senate Committee on Education, and Mheshimiwa Peter Orero, MP Kibra, member of the National Assembly Education Committee. Asanteni sana, gentlemen and lady. Of course, we are looking at the education sector, and usually it's a good point to begin by just assessing the general state of our education sector this morning. We are looking all the way from the primary level, where there is this big conversation on the transition to grade 9. We are looking at the secondary schools. All have been affected, say, by issues to do with even capitation. There is delayed capitation in secondary schools. If we go into the institutions of higher learning, there is still a lot of challenges that we have witnessed when it comes to threats of industrial action, if not already some, like, for example, the very latest, the Technical Universities of Kenya, saying that they've gone without salary for almost 3 months. And I'm looking at a 360 observation of how our state of education looks like this morning. And your opening comments probably will be your own diagnosis of whether we have a crisis or not. Let me begin with you, Otieno.
Thank you very much. And just to say good morning to our viewers. I may need to just begin by, saying that I represent the civil society. So I work for Zizi Africa Foundation, where we work in the intersection between, evidence, policy, and practice. And we envisage a world where, all young people, children and youth thrive. In my diagnosis of the situation that is currently, happening in our education system, I think, I may not call it a crisis, but I think there are a number of challenges that we need to overcome, and challenges that I think we should have been able to avoid. Challenges that stem from poor planning, and I think sometimes just lack of political will to be able to do things, because we have been implementing this ABC curriculum for over 8 years now. And if that is the case, then it means that it shouldn't have looked as if we've been taken by surprise, that we have, children that are transitioning to grade 9. It means we would have resourced this process very well. It means we would have planned and prepared our education system to be able to support this particular transition. But again, there are also recurring challenges which I think just point to lack of political will. Why do we have this recurring conversation around delays in capitation in schools? How do we expect children to be going to school? How do we expect the head teachers or the school leaders to be able to manage schools?
All right.
It points to something that speaks to the little importance that we attach to our education. And for me, that is a travesty.
All right. Admitting that there is challenges, but Otieno says we are not in the red zone yet. He wouldn't term it a crisis. I don't know what you think, Grace. Are we already in the red zone, or we are somewhere close or far from it, from your own analysis?
Thank you very much for having us today. I want to speak with regard to the university sector. And the challenge is just funding. If we have sufficient funding in the university sector, then a myriad of problems will be sorted out. Especially, I will speak about whatever system is put in place. Could you have the salaries of the staff paid directly by the exchequer, as opposed to universities being asked to look for funds to pay for staff salary and other activities in the university? The reason I say so is because as a result of lack of payment of salary by the government, then it is the staff that suffer. We have seen pension schemes collapse. The one of Technical University totally collapsed. We have read recently of University of Nairobi, Moi, Egerton. These institutions are suffering, members are suffering there, because if the university does not receive enough funds, what happens is the third-party payments are not met, and it's the staff that suffer. You can imagine working for many years and then you leave without your pension.
All right. And if the staff suffer, then this trickles down to whoever the staff is supposed to be serving. Well said. We're beginning to get a diagnosis, seems like. But Mheshimiwa, what are your thoughts? And also, even just responding to some of the concerns he has raised about the lack of political goodwill as one of the things that probably would be leading to some of the challenges that are bedeviling the education sector.
So thank you, Safi. We have many challenges in the education sector, like my co-panelists have observed. But talking about lack of political goodwill, I think sometimes I would want to look at it from a completely different angle. I think political interference also causes us some problems in education. And why do I say this? If you look at CBC, basically, junior school initially was supposed to be domiciled in secondary schools. But when the current regime came into power, I think His Excellency the President responded to the cries by parents then, because parents were not comfortable with letting their, grade 7 pupils join secondary school. And so, although the professional plan was to have this particular segment or this particular level of education domiciled in education, of course, the president politically, and of course, I don't blame him. He was responding to, like I've said, the pressure that was there from the public. Then I think a pronouncement was made that junior secondary school was going to be domiciled in primary schools, which has caused us very many problems because one, if you look at the current situation, we are not very sure that we do not have enough teachers to handle the junior secondary school. While this year, secondary schools are not admitting Form 1s. So that would tell you that there are teachers in secondary school that could be competent to be teaching junior secondary. But we will not do that because they're in secondary school and junior secondary is domiciled in a primary school. So I think I would call that now political interference. So sometimes I think you have to look at it as the problems we get from political interference, even again when you're talking about lack of political goodwill. And again, I hope I'm not taking too much time. If you look at capitation, for example, again, there has been a lot of political interference, which some may want to call a lack of political goodwill, because capitation is not only being delayed to be disbursed, but amounts, and now no less a person but than the PS Basic Education has admitted that the amounts, especially in secondary school, which used to be about 22,000 some hundreds for each learner, has now been reduced to about 17,000 Kenya shillings with the inflation and of course the value of money, the same value of money. Then that brings a lot of concern. So basically, it's not all gloom, but we have challenges. And political goodwill, political interference is something that we may need to look at and decide, are we going to let a policy formulation be done by the professionals, and we go as per what the professionals tell us and not interfere politically.
All right, political interference, political goodwill, a choice of terminologies there. But Mheshimiwa Orero, what are your sentiments as well? This is an area that you're very passionate about. You've been very vocal about, issues that have emerged in the education sector. If you look at it today, are you happy with what you see and the direction that this is taking?
Thank you. Of course, I'm not happy.
No, I wouldn't if you don't say.
You have pronounced yourself that I've been critical on education matters, because that is where my life is. I've been in education for over 30 years. Yeah. And I've looked at various regimes and also various policies change. And the framework sometimes depend on transition of different political parties in this country. And we have not looked at education as a completely different institution that should be run independently by the professionals. When you look at the secondary schools now, and the primary schools, we have had big challenges. Sometimes it's just the use of words. It can be a crisis, can be challenges, or bottlenecks. But we are saying that as at of the moment, by the time Professor Magwa was the CS of education, I think this CBC had been domiciled in a secondary school. By then I was still a principal. We put up classes for these students to join secondary schools. But when the new regime came in, they formed the Presidential Working Party, which again came with different policies, especially affecting funding and all that in the university. We have sat, I can see the chair here, we have sat with them many times trying to look at solutions for the universities. But I can say one of the biggest challenges that we have in the education sectors affecting the secondary school is the idea of capitation. A while ago, during President Kibaki's time, when free day secondary school was introduced, the government used to inject 22,000 shillings per student. And this enabled the schools to run very well. But as we moved on, now this capitation reduced to 17,000 shillings. But it's not just about reducing to 17,000. Out of these 17,000 shillings per student annually, not all of it is released to the schools.
On time. Was there sort of like a justification as to why this figure probably would have moved from 22,000 to 17?
I think
anything that makes sense to you from where you sit?
Not really. I don't think it makes sense. Despite all the economic challenges that we have, if we are serious about our education, it does not make sense. If we are moving towards making education to be free for all day secondary school students and from primary schools, because if we don't invest in education, education is an equalizer. It is what propels both economic development of a country or otherwise, political or otherwise. So we are saying that it is when we want to move from where we are in terms of education achievements, we cannot now, at this critical moment, reduce the funding to secondary schools. After reducing those funding, I am sure, with evidential background, that we did not, as a government, remit the 17,000 meant for our kids in secondary school. They remitted about 11,000, leaving another critical per student, 6,000 per student. So when the planning of the secondary schools by a board of managements, then they should be allowed to plan without the 6,000 per student every time to alleviate this lack of funds within institution. I am saying this passionately because most schools now cannot run. They have a lot of debts with the suppliers. And if we are budgeting, like this second phase of budgeting, we need to put then pending bills for schools also now. It's very critical. Like in the universities, they still have about 88 billion pending bills that have not been paid. We also need to bring for secondary school, these schools with the bills, then the government should pay for it, and these bills, so that we alleviate this. I think as a country, we need to be very intentional, very purposeful in our approaches towards solving critical problems that are facing schools in this country. We must ensure it's not just about economic. We have the personnel, we have the teachers. Last year, we, as Education Committee, had put about 2 billion for promotions of the teachers, but the budget committee slashed and gave 1 billion. You have seen that today we have 189,000 teachers looking for 25,000 posts. This is because for the last 17 years, there was a stagnation in promotion of teachers in this country. There were no funds that were allocated for teachers in this country. So even as the government of the day puts 1 billion for promotion, that it makes the chances now. It is about the money that they have, which determines the number of teachers who can be promoted. Right. So they need to put more money for the teacher. Can you imagine somebody not being promoted for 17 years, stagnated? Yesterday, I was in a function down in Homa Bay. A teacher came and approached me. She had graduated in 2009 and has not been employed up to today. She has
2009 to 2025.
Yes, to date. I also had one who was 43 years. He graduated, has not been employed. We have to be very purposeful, because such kind of people now, you can only predict that they will live in a depression for the rest of their lifetime.
Right.
So as a country, we must deliberately look at the problems that are facing the education sector.
I like how it began, of course, looking at on the surface what could be ailing the education sector. I like also the optimism. Seems like, okay, fine, we have a problem, but we are not there yet in terms of just, calling it a crisis. Depends on how you look at it. But we will be looking at the best way forward with my panel here once we come back from this particular break. If you have any issues as well that you can raise with us, you're a teacher, you're a stakeholder, you are a student, be it in primary or even in university, please engage us on social media at Citizen TV Kenya, at Safin_Aching, and we'll share your thoughts and your questions when we come back from this particular break. Do stay with us. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. This is Daybreak, in case you're just joining us, and we are looking at the education sector this morning, sort of like raising the challenges that have emerged in this particular sector. I'm having a panel of 4, a lady and 3 gentlemen. Just in case you're just joining us, we are having this morning Samuel Otieno, Director, Advocacy and Partnerships, Zizi Afrique. We are also having Grace Nyongesa, University's Academic Staff Union Chairperson, John Nyutu, Chair of the Senate Committee on Education. We have Mheshimiwa Peter Orero, MP Kibra, who also sits at the National Assembly Education Committee. And we had just scratched the surface when it comes to what is happening in the education sector. And before we went on break, sort of like we, concluded that seems like there is a problem, and we want to find out exactly what that problem is and how best to approach it. Because like I said when we were starting the program, this is one of the most sensitive sectors in our country, and something needs to be done so that once and for all we resolve the crisis in the education sector. And I'll just come back to you, Otieno. We were looking at where the weight is when it comes to the challenges that we are facing. And if you agree with me, if you've been in this country, you have noticed that we've been sort of like running in circles when it comes to hitting it in addressing the challenges that are bedeviling the education sector for a very long time. Regimes come and go, and we change presidents, we change cabinet secretaries, and we never seem to be getting where the pressure is coming from. I know in your organization you look at what is happening on the ground a lot, and probably you can tell us what would be your key priority areas if you look at the education sector this morning, from the learners to the teachers to even the people who are managing the teachers. Where do you think we are losing it most when it comes to what's happening?
Thank you very much, Safin. If you look at education systems across the world, one of the things that countries that have developed always make sure is to foolproof the education system from political interference, like Mheshimiwa Nyutu said. So it cannot be that our education systems would change depending on who is in power. Because education systems is an important thing that is planned way in advance, and people have strategic plans, and we have the national education sector plan, for example, that is supposed to inform how we manage our education for the next 5 years. And therefore, if some of these policies are followed, then we wouldn't be having a challenge where we're just suffering because there's a change in regime or there's a change in the person who is a minister. Honorable Orero talked about the late Professor Magoha and the many reforms that he had actually started in the ministry. I think one of the things we must be thinking, and we must have a conversation around as a nation, is how then do we carry on some of those policies? How do we sustain our plans, and how do we have a long-term view about our education rather than leaving it to the person who will be in the office? But let me come back to your point. And I think I'll restrict myself mainly around basic education because that is our mainstay when we work most of the time. We talked about the issue of resources, and that affects quite a bit of other things. One, as Mheshimiwa Nyuto was talking about political interference, it cannot be as a nation that the Ministry of Education or education budgeting is where we run to when we feel like our budget isn't quite fitting, and that is where we run to reduce money. Because the moment you reduce capitation from 22,000 to 17,000, what you're doing is you're interfering with even the households where these children come from. And for human beings, we have got a hierarchy of needs. So you're basically saying that 6,000 or 5 to 6,000 that was being used for other things, like even maybe feeding these children, is actually now having to be paid this. But I think there are other issues and there are other places where we're not getting it very right, especially when it comes to CBC. I think as a nation, we need to work very seriously on shifting our mindsets around what CBC brings and what CBC portends. We've seen where CBC has been given, first of all, lip service. It's working in the private schools, but it's not working in government schools because of issues to do with resourcing, issues to do with teacher professional development and preparation, issues around just creating the environment. The spirit of junior school was that this was the place where children were supposed to begin now starting to have an idea of what pathways they want to take and what kind of careers they want. But because of lack of resources, you find that the default is that the schools and the classrooms are just a classroom. So we've not invested enough to create an environment that would help children now begin to visualize what they need to do. There is the issue around materials, developing materials progressively as we go, which is not a bad way of doing it. But again, if you don't bring these materials to the teachers and induct the teachers on the use of these materials and how they apply them in the classroom, then it becomes a problem. And then there is, of course, the issue, the whole issue around, looking at CBC from a parental engagement side. What is the role of parents in supporting the implementation of CBC? And you find there's a problem. The system that we seem to be running now in our schools is one which expects that the teachers should be able to do everything and you leave a parent. Yet CBC is about also values and life skills which have been infused into the curriculum, and values need to be lived both in school and back at home. But lastly, the importance of data and evidence. What is the place of data and evidence? You asked Honorable Rero whether there was any justification for the reduction of the capitation, and he told you he doesn't think of any. So we definitely need to do something about how we move beyond just using our wisdom, what we call our wisdom, to actually entrenching these things on data. Government is the single most collector of a lot of data, and there's a lot of information. And go to the ministry, look at all the state agencies that deal with education, whether it's the Curriculum Institute, whether it's the Examination Council, they have got a lot of data and evidence. Teacher Service Commission, a lot of data and evidence of the number of teachers we need and how we need to distribute them.
All right.
But the question is, why do we just fail to use this data to inform our decisions and policies that we come up with?
All right.
That's the thing.
There's something I've observed from what he has shared with us with regards to the list of challenges that he sees in our education sector. And I'd like to begin from the capitation issue. We agree it has been reduced. That's another issue altogether. But then, what causes the delay from both of you, Eshimiwas? Borrowing from your experience as a principal, there is a structure with which this capitation is supposed to be disbursed within an academic year or a school calendar. We have never met that target as a country. If you look at the years that have gone by, even with that structure in place, schools are still always saying that the capitation has been delayed. This delay that is constant, it has become sort of like a perennial problem. Where is it emanating from the information that you have? Any one of you can. Yeah.
Okay, I think I can talk about this. Safin, you know that when the national budget is done and, of course, approved by the National Assembly, they're just, appropriations of, they're just figures. What am I trying to say? That when you allocate, for example, 600 billion to the Ministry of Education, that amount is not, disbursed to the ministry. Everything is still held at the Treasury. And remember, by the time we are making a budget, we do not have those funds available. It is a matter of sometimes government meets expenditure as it collects revenue. So that then there will be this allocation, but you will be told, even in parliamentary businesses, for example, even committee business, you'll be told that there is no exchequer, meaning there is no money available. Although it has been allocated, but exchequer, it has not been, it's not availed by the Treasury. So that is one of the problems. But then we will still have to question one or two things. Why, for example, there are those delays in capitation, why there is that reduction in capitation, while we have enough exchequer to do, for example, renovations in State House, at the residence of the Deputy President in Karen, while we still can see a lot of largesse in government expenditure, and those amounts are available. And just to put an example, there is a video that has gone viral of the recently, appointed CSs from ODM, attending a function, I think, was it in Siaya, with about 4 choppers, I think 3 or so choppers. So the question is, why is there no exchequer for capitation, where there is all these largesse, while you can still see expenditure in a very big way in other areas
why are you just
of government?
The 3 choppers in Sierra.
Because it's the most recent.
We saw some 11 choppers in just athletics. Just with
I know. So so what I'm saying is these delays are not justifiable, even though Treasury may want to say that it's yet, for example, to collect enough revenue, because we can see, a lot of largesse elsewhere,
But you chair a committee that ought to be asking these tough questions to the
Of course we do
ask. What are they telling you?
Of course we do ask.
What are they telling you?
If you call at the committee, and my colleague here, Honorable Orero, will tell you, you, for example, invite the CS
She is our witness. We have with her in those committees.
Yes, you invite the CS for education.
So what happens?
And question about this. Of course, the CS education will tell you the exchequer is yet to be released to us, You call now the CS Treasury. They will tell you, we are still collecting money, or money will be availed. So it's back and forth.
So,
but
I think to say we promise more than we can deliver. We allocate more than we have.
Not exactly, because any budgetary deficit, of course, we have ways of making up. But this is now what Sam was calling lack of political goodwill, and that is why we are ready to release money to go to some, like the examples I've given, and we are not ready to avail money for important functions like education. So really, it's our politics that we need to manage. It's, we need to allow professionals to do their job. Let us not seek approvals, because this is why we have a problem. And if you allow me, Safin, for example, why, for example, does the CS education have to go and share the results of a national examination with the president before it is released? So that tells you this interference is there, and it's a tradition. And these are some of the things that we should be able to depart from. Any committee, including the Presidential Working Party on Educational Reforms, of course, that one is different because it had been appointed by the president. But every committee has to present its report to the president before it goes out there, at least so that even professionals in that particular area are not able to have time to scrutinize it before it goes out there. The president has to look at it first. So what we are saying is let us do away with political interference, especially in matters of education and health. If we are going to interfere anywhere else, and sorry, I want my colleague to also take his time. We avoid health and education. Look at, for example, we are not talking about health. Look at what we are doing now. It is the politicians going out there telling people to register for Shashi. The president is the one making this campaign. I mean, they are professionals in the health sector. So what we are saying is let professionals do their job. Let us do away with this political interference.
All right.
And our systems are going to work.
All right. Yutu says there's a shisha. Anyway, I mean, when capitation is not there, borrowing from your experience, what happens in the schools?
I think
how are the schools?
It brings a lot of crisis within the school setup.
Uh-huh.
One is that certain programs are not able to run in the system. We have what is called vote heads. Those vote heads deal with various sectors in school. We have like for paying workers in the school, we have for tuition, vote head, and operation. So when these vote heads do not have enough money, it means certain aspects of school programs are affected. And now with this economic crunch going down, most principals will resort to borrowing, either from the locals or from wherever, so that they can sustain the students.
Or charging illegal.
Or they are forced to ask of the Board of Management to allow them to charge extra fee to fill the gap that is created by lack of capitation release. So we are saying that some of the principals are in a great dilemma. You have over 3,000 students, and you are told to manage these students without funding. So what do you think they will do? The easiest option is to ask parents to meet the gap. In fact, it has been my proposal. There are certain schools where parents can meet or can pay for those gaps. Also, and there are also schools where the parents cannot pay. The national school, you'll find extra county schools, now these big schools, some parents are able to pay. They agree to pay. But we also have parents who can never pay. But because education is equalizer, that's why we have capitation, that the government takes a responsibility to ensure that this money reaches the schools. Some schools go on strike because
So are you proposing that the parents who can pay their children
you have had my statement that because of equalization in education now, and they want to make education to be the same for everyone.
Yes.
Now the government must take responsibility
of every child.
Because it causes strike in some schools. If you cannot have your food, the daily food that you have, the students will not understand. They don't even know what capitation is all about. So you might find that they will riot. They will cause riot. Some even ban schools. We also have teachers, the Board of Management teachers. In some schools, they are not paid because of lack of maybe capitation. So we do not have enough personnel to carry out a serious curriculum implementation. So in a sense, we are saying it affects various fulcrums holding the education sector within various institutions in this country. So we are urging that this capitation that my friend has talked about, the exchequer, that is how it is, by the way. Last year, I think they collected just about 2.9 trillion in the country. So they missed the target of collection. The KRA missed that target. Yesterday, I also read that they have also missed the target of money collection. We always suggest that they tighten the loopholes instead of just increasing. Like you can increase the taxes, and if you are not even collecting the small ones, then there is no need to increase. So collect all the taxes that you envisage to do. Then if you find that it is not enough after collecting, we cannot think of other ways of raising a fund. So I think it is important that as a country, as education, we must have a synchronized and a skewed approach towards sustainability of students within the schools by merely releasing the capitation.
All right. Yeah. Talking about funding and how this affects the education sector, I'd like to rope in, Grace onto this conversation, looking at the state institutions of higher learning now, shifting gears a little bit. There's been a lot that we have seen in this area when it comes to the industrial action threats, even recently just lecturers of some universities going on strike. Talk to us about the chronology of how this has panned out. How did we find ourselves in this particular situation? What seems to be the detail that we are missing? Technical University of Kenya lecturers currently have declared that they're not going back to class until they're paid what is owed to them. But exactly who should blink first in this crisis?
Back again to the same conversation. The government should fund public universities. If you remember, a couple of years ago, all students, C plus is the minimum grade for joining universities. Mm-hmm. And therefore, all students who get C plus and above join the university automatically. These are students who are funded by the government. The government should fund education, prioritize education, right from basic through to university. Mheshimiwa has talked about pending bills. It really annoys us in the university sector that part of pending bills is salary that is owed to members of staff. Egerton University was on strike for a couple of months, and nobody was blinking. Nobody was addressing the issue. Part of what is pending bills in Egerton University is salary owed to staff. I don't know whether there's any other sector, public sector, any other institution, public sector, that has a pay slip that has deferred salary. Egerton University has deferred salary. If you pick any pay slip from an Egertonian, you'll realize there is a component there of deferred salary. And that deferred salary is pending bills. Why can these people be paid their salaries that are pending? Some are about to retire. If we talk about pension schemes, the Egerton pension scheme is also very weak. At some point, they were in court to address the issues of the government not remitting its part, even the contribution from the member. Technical University, the same. University of Nairobi, the same. Moi, the same. And others will follow suit. It becomes a cancer. It starts here and it continues. Talking about funding, how it is affecting us and why we keep on getting out on the streets. And I said earlier that when salaries are delayed or not paid, proper funding of the university sector, then it is members of staff who suffer. It is their third-party deductions that are not remitted. It is as bad as if you're looking for a job elsewhere and they want to look at your income tax records. They are not good because the university never remitted. We are talking of people taking loans and the loans are not repaid and some have been sued. Technical University has that. Even more university. Members were sued by the individual banks to pay the loans. So that again, when your salary delays, when it hits the bank, the whole of it is scooped. Mm-hmm. How do we expect such members of staff to carry out their duties? People are frustrated. Mental health issues are real in this sector.
Mm-hmm. But is the problem money, or
it is
the
money.
Management of this money, or even the ability of these institutions to generate money? Because that has been a discussion as well when stakeholders are trying to come up with a solution on this.
Thank you, Safin. Mm-hmm. Universities are there to offer services, teaching and research. Mm-hmm. To ask them to generate money. They're not a business enterprise where they are selling services and, getting some money. They exist for teaching and research. So expecting universities to generate income is really a tall order. Pay staff.
I think we know that the government needs to fund the universities, and I think where the rain started beating us is when we started implementing the World Bank and IMF policies that also came to affect some of the universities. Initially, when the government was releasing money to universities, they did not specify how that money was being used. It was incumbent upon the vice chancellor to show that this is going to be salaries, this is going to be administration. But now I think they have a structured way, and the government has a responsibility. That's the way she is talking, to pay the staff. But when we sat in the committee, we realized that the government was not remitting statutory deductions to some of the lecturers. But when you went to Moi University, one thing that the universities must also do, if you have over 300 acres and it is lying fallow, it is also good that you make use of this land. You can plant your maize to reduce the expenditure on this. We found that...
But she's saying universities are there to teach, not to plant maize.
That is what is in the book. That's why I was coming in. That as we are moving on, you realize that when we went to Moi University, we even asked them. They told us that they have some land in Nairobi that they were going to sell to meet the deficit. It's over 1 billion. So when that chance arises, we also encourage the universities that they can do the same. If you have so much land, why can't you be pragmatic enough? We are not exonerating the government. The government must meet their obligations of ensuring that they get the capitation, enough capitation. But those universities that can also get involved in public-private partnership must also be encouraged. So we need to have these sectors working in a manner that they are synchronized to enable the proper running of the university.
I think I want to add something on that. I think I want to support the argument by my colleague, Honorable Orero, that universities, although Grace here says that universities exist for the sole purpose of teaching and research, but if you look at Egerton University, for example, which she has mentioned severally in her submission, this is a university that, if I'm not wrong, that has very many agricultural courses. So these departments agriculture, I mean, this research should also involve some farming in the university land, which should actually also, which is a productive enterprise, even as we learn. So I think I support that even as we pressurize the government to do everything that it should do, that let everybody, let us have an initiative, every one of us, to try and see whether we can be able to earn a coin out there. The same case with the secondary schools. Some of them, I know secondary schools who that operate, that have, very many, dairy cows, and they get a lot of milk for for use by the students. And if they have a surplus of it, they can also sell out there and get something that can help. So indeed, again, even as we want to be hard on government, let us know that all of us have a responsibility to do that which we can. To help, in running our institutions.
Right. What do you think about that, Grace? I want a chance to respond. They've given proposal that it is actually
Thank
possible.
you very much. I want to respectfully disagree. The fact that there is land there and capitation is not given as is supposed to be given by the government to the institution. As much as you may have land, what would you do with land if you have no money to even plant anything, if at all? If you decided to do agriculture on the land, what would you do? The capitation in the university is not even sufficient to pay salaries alone. And that's why we are saying, if the salary component was paid by the government, like other institutions, and you'll realize, for example, in the education sector alone, when teachers will have earned their salary by 26th, 27th, thereabout, some universities don't know when they'll pay salaries until they collect some money. This is totally unfair to the staff in the university sector, because when capitation hits the accounts, it is not even enough to pay salaries alone. And that is why we have had universities not pay 100% of salary. When I talked about Egerton, they were not getting 100% of their salary. At some point it was 50, 60. Went to 60, went to 70, and then at least it has gone to 100. but their salary is still pending, unpaid salary.
All right.
When we talk about generating income, it is easier to say, but to do it is not easy. If the capitation that hits the account is not even enough to pay salaries, how then do you deal with other issues in the university that are supposed to be taken care of? So I think this issue of universities generating income, specifically even to pay salaries, if the salary component was taken, then we would be able to say that task the universities probably to do what is being suggested. For they have the money for operations, but if they are waiting for that, look at now when the funding has not the funding model, we all know it has a challenge now. By now, if the money has not hit their accounts, how are these universities expected to run their affairs?
Good question.
But just to be clear, sorry, Safin.
Let me also allow Otieno to weigh in, and then I'll come back to you. I'm interested in also hearing your insights on how best this can be approached, because capitation affects across board the option of institutions of learning raising their own revenue and trying to support whatever they're getting from the government. What are your thoughts on how best this can be addressed?
Thank you, Safid. I think first of all, we must begin from the premise where we know that it's the role of the government to offer education to its citizens.
It's a constitutionally protected right.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the problems that we've been trying to confront as an organization as Easy Africa is the problem of too much schooling but very little learning. And that is what we are finding ourselves in. So if children go to school and the capitation has not reached the schools, what you're basically saying, there'll be no learning materials. For the case of boarding schools, there is nothing to support the boarding section and ensure children are comfortable. What do you end up having? You end up having a demotivated teacher. And this actually cuts across. If a lecturer has not been paid for all these months, then how do you expect this to be the very person who you are entrusting in shaping an entire generation? But again, I also want to challenge our honorable members who are in this panel. How can we be talking about, on the one hand, having universities to have good management that generates revenue, when, as the case of Omoil, as we saw a number of years back, it is the politicians who decide who becomes the vice chancellor of an institution. We have a problem of that interference, a problem of ethnicity, a problem of not letting the organs that exist to be able to do their work. And therefore, if somebody becomes a vice chancellor just because he comes from the locality, you cannot expect a lot of that kind of thinking to be there. But I think the other important issue that we should be asking ourselves, and this is a result of some of the lack of seriousness that we've attached to education. You saw in the recently released KCSE results, almost half the students go to D+ and below. What does that speak about our education system? Are we intentionally failing a big section of this country in terms of what they're able to get, in terms of how we prepare them, even for these national examinations? And then the flip side is, what does that say about the opportunities that we need to be opening up for these students who got those marks, D+ and below? I know Honorable Newton and our organization have engaged quite a bit on the issues around TVET. The cancer of education financing in this country and resourcing is something that affects even TVET. We have a situation where we have got so many TVET institutions that have been put up basically to create access. But the issue of quality is a problem because the county governments do not take TVET education seriously. And you have got the whole problem around, even when we are talking about resources. You've got so many sources of revenue or resources that can be channeled and be properly managed within the education sector, but that is not happening. The national government, CDF, is still giving bursaries to students in primary and secondary school, when we know very well, it's still giving bursaries even sometimes to TVET, and vice versa. Sometimes you also find even the county government coming to give bursaries to students in primary and secondary school. And you ask yourself, why do we have this kind of mix-up when actually we can decide to have a more coordinated and a more organized way? Because I don't think that it's about the amount of resources available, but it's also how we are managing these particular resources so that they go to the right people and at the right time, because that's really important. It doesn't help a head teacher if you submit if you disburse the capitation at the end of the term. It means there's a lot of learning loss that has happened
in between.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for saying that, Otieno, and even for introducing another aspect that I wanted us to discuss, the back and forth on bursaries, but we'll come to that later. Mheshimiwa, you had something to add?
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to tell Grace that we personally, I was not saying that universities should be able to generate income that will be able to pay salaries. Of course, it cannot. What we were saying is that we need to see some effort. At least that little that will be done by income so generated will also show that the universities are doing something. In other words, let us not have any resource anywhere that is underutilized. I don't know whether you want me to say something else. You look like you want us to go for a break.
No.
So I just wanted to be clear on that. Because from the
psychologist.
Because
you can read your mind.
Just like he read your mind. You are so I just wanted to make it clear so that viewers do not, misunderstand my submission. We are not trying to say that the university should generate enough income to pay salaries and do the things that are supposed to be done in the university, teaching and research.
All right.
What we are saying is let every available resource in any public institution be utilized, and whatever little that can be made then will be. I mean, 1 shilling is better than none at all. None at all. That is all I wanted to say.
I wanted to also hear your thoughts on whether money is the only problem. There is the issue of leadership, there is the issue of corruption in institutions of higher learning. These are realities we cannot run away from. Let's also talk about how that affects the money that is allocated to these institutions and what happens.
I think we can never say that money is the only problem.
Yeah.
No, we can never say that, except when we meet WASU. I think they are gifted. When you see their Secretary General, the way they articulate their issues, even before they talk, you think they are all aggrieved. I think that is one of the qualities that they have. But we also have management issues. Like we went to Moi, they had taken billions as loan from the bank. And the way it was utilized, you can clearly and vividly see that this was not the best way to utilize that money. And it went without being properly utilized. When you go to Moi University and you find that the employees are more than enough in the universities. So the ratio of the employees and the capitation must never be at variance. We must look at the management. How many employees do you need? Why would you need 50 employees and you have 200 employees? Where are you going to raise the funding for that? Because sometimes we say political interference. The politicians have said you must employ 10 of these my cronies. Simply because the university is within their region. It should never happen. We must give room for the management of this institution to use their own initiative to see how well they can manage that institution. You also realize that in certain universities, even if they have enough money, and themselves they are not remitting the statutory deductions. We have had cases. Even when I was a principal, there are certain principals who never admitted statutory deduction to their employees. So this sometimes is a management issue. They can have the money, but they do not utilize it as required. So we also need to have professionals. Even when we are choosing the vice chancellor, DVC's administration, we must go for people with impeccable characters in management issues. We cannot pick just anybody else who has no management acumen to occupy such positions.
But is that possible with the level of political interference that we have?
That is why we are saying the education matters. We must move them away from political interference. Not just education matters, but even health issues. We must remove completely, obliterate completely political interference and allow the professionals to manage those institutions.
All right.
I just wanted to add something on that because I was a rejoinder to what Grace had said. When we talk about this political interference, the issue of management of resources, political interference is a big culprit in what is happening even in our universities. And for example, my university, there is a time one professor who was a VC was actually kicked out.
That is my friend. We used to teach together chemistry when we was at Sunshine. Professor.
So, and they installed somebody from that region. So these are the problems. So when that person comes, so you are made vice chancellor not because maybe you are the most qualified, but because of where you come from. So that is political interference, and I believe that is what had brought down Moi University. We have another problem at the University of Nairobi here, where I think the chair of the council, that is Professor Anangwe, I think was appointed and given instructions to deal with not just Kiama, to deal with with members of one particular community. And that is why Professor Kiama Gitahi is no longer the VC at the University of Nairobi.
You think
recently?
It's factual? Let's
yes.
I
don't want to prosecute that case here. I know. Yes.
No,
it's
here
factual.
we only deal with facts.
It's okay, fine. It's factual. And it's a long case whose details I have. If I had the time, I would give them to you. Professor Kiama has even been removed as a professor of the university, not just the VC. He is not allowed, as we speak, to teach in any university. And not because of anything that you can lay that is tangible. Recently, Joe Kibe was also removed from the council. And when you look at the things that made him be removed, there is nothing tangible. But it's because somebody wants to deal with a particular, this is what you're calling political interference. Somebody wants to deal with members of a particular community, just like happened at Moi University, and that is why we have these many managerial issues at the university.
So the management of institutions of higher learning of any political interference.
That is the position that we are holding.
All right.
And we need to rethink also who needs to appoint even the councils in the university. Of course, I know it's the CS that does it currently, but the CS is an appointee of the president. So we need to really rethink about this and see exactly how will we free our institutions from political interference. Because if the council is appointed by the president, by the CS education, and the CS education is appointed by the president, even though under the new constitution the CS doesn't have to be a politician, but he is appointed by a politician. So this is somebody that will of course do the bidding for the politician that appointed him, and any interests that this politician has in a particular institution, of course, will be delivered by this particular appointee.
All right.
I think on our desk as education committee, we have quite a number of bills which have been brought in matters of appointments of the vice chancellors, deputy vice chancellors, and even the period that is supposed to take, and the numbers that is submitted for the appointment. So in due course, maybe by the end of this financial year, we will have come up with those bills and present them to the
things may change.
Yeah, things might change.
There's something I want us to finalize with as we talk about the institutions of higher learning, because we are running almost out of time and there's a lot that we still need to discuss, and that's the issue of the students and their plight. We cannot talk about lecturers and leave the students out of this. Right now there is a very big quagmire when it comes to the fate of learners, owing to the fact that the new funding model was declared unconstitutional. Of course, we know that the funding agencies, that is the University Fund and the Higher Education Loans Board, have challenged this decision of the court. We are yet to hear how that will pan out, but of course HELB had also been delayed. So first years, second years who are beneficiaries of NFM, that's the new funding model, and even the ones who are beneficiaries of HELB are currently uncertain of what their future portends when it comes to this semester. So I don't know what is the state of affairs at the institutions of higher learning, and your thoughts on what's going on.
Of course, that's a crisis in the offing, definitely. And it goes back to just what I've been saying, because the same funds from the students are expected to assist the university in terms of even paying salaries. So if there's going to be delay, then you are sure there's going to be a crisis. A crisis is looming. If there are no funds,
it is already happening.
As it is,
yeah,
there's a crisis looming. Because it is the same funds that the universities will then put together and be able to pay staff.
Why does it seem like it's touch and go when it comes to matters education? Because suddenly we don't have help, we don't have university fund, this new funding model that was supposed to be the solution to what help, challenges were. I mean, why does it seem like we are solving problems as we go? What happened to really having a clear path before something is rolled out? Otieno,
I wanted to say something to agree with the members of Parliament and Senate.
On university fund or something else?
On management. Political interference. This must just stop. Because as long as we continue experiencing that, and then he has mentioned the issue of vice chancellors, deputy vice chancellors. There are universities should not have an acting vice chancellor for so long, acting deputy vice chancellor for so long. Why would you do that? And we have enough resource in this country of people who can occupy those spaces, be interviewed, occupy those spaces, and help in management of an institution. Right now, I want to talk about the issue of management. The other day we appeared before the Education Committee, Parliamentary Education Committee, when we had the CBA issues. And universities are now implementing as agreed. There's a notorious university, Kirinyaga University. It does not want to honor what other institutions have done. Where are we heading with such institutions? Then again, invite Mheshimiwa and the committee, just what you did for Moi University. It will be good to see what's happening at Technical University. If your committee would take time to go and find out what's happening at Technical University. Because Technical University staff are going on a strike. Genuinely so. And I think we need to solve these issues as we go, so that we can be able to manage.
I just wanted to I took my time to go and talk to Professor Mutua at Tuk University, and he took me through their challenges that they have, and we are going to ensure that the Education Committee moves in to the Tuk University and sits with the management and see how best we can solve their stalemate and their problems. So I think this is something that as Education Committee will ensure that happens. Just as we have met, they have come there many times. And I think as a committee, we have also decided that we work both with the universities and the government to ensure that we solve and sort out their stalemate.
All right.
Yes. I think you ask a very important question. I think for me, it's about mindsets. We have to make a decision as a nation where we want to place our education system. Maybe 70% of the people in government right now are people who some of us, who some of them actually survived on government, funding or people's goodwill to even get an education. So why is it that all of a sudden you have got these kinds of people leading government, making decisions around government, and it seems like education is one of those things that they are not taking serious? Is it a deliberate attempt to make sure that a big population is then not educated? Because it is becoming an education justice issue. What does it mean if I'm a parent of the current grade 9? These children have been our children, they have been in this country for all these 9 years. Why is it that we are reaching a level where we are being told we have got 60% of the classrooms are complete? Where are we then taking the other 40%? And even the data and the numbers that are being thrown around do not work very well. Sometimes you get a feeling that from the political front, sometimes some of the people who are even made to lead the education docket are some of the most unserious people. I think,
I don't know the measures the seriousness.
I think we've made our education a joke, and that is where we have a problem. The moment we reimagine our education and what we want our education to do to our country, and look at education as the only thing that would, one, create the social equity that we want, but also secondly, as the stepping stone that we will use to even spur economic growth, then we would think about it a bit more seriously, we will resource it more seriously, and we will plan better for it very seriously. Kenya has got no shortage of experts and professionals, and we work a lot with government agencies, and there are a lot of serious professionals in this country. But they'll tell you, yes, I hold this position in this state agency. But look, I don't even have resources to even do my work. Mm-hmm. And you know, and like Mheshimiwa was talking about, why would you give a budget figure that sounds very nice when in the real sense you're not going to follow through and be able to deliver that money? So again, letting these institutions that have been formulated to carry out their mandate is extremely critical. The role of evidence, and evidence cannot just be coming from government. At civil society, we have got a lot of organizations that do research that is supposed to inform. And I think in civil society, we have got the advantage of not bringing out data that pleases or that makes the government look well. So our education system must also be open to support, to alternative views, to alternative evidence and data from non-state organizations. But also, lastly, I think the role of management is something that has been downplayed in this country for far too long. For example, when we are talking about quality, the boards of management in primary and secondary schools, it's for me a sleeping giant. It's for me a body that can actually be leveraged, one, to support the quality of education through monitoring, but secondly, even what Waheshimiwa were talking about, even the issue around resource mobilization. Who sits with the head teachers to just understand, okay, fine, this capitation has not come, what do we do in the meantime to make sure that children are learning? And that is why I brought in the issue of parental engagement and empowerment, so that they are part of the learning of their children, so that everything that is actually planned within the education system has the role of parent, the role of the teacher, and the role of the student. But I think as it is right now, in my view, we haven't just yet placed our education where it's supposed to be.
Where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
As we're about to wrap up, Mheshimiwa, I also like to hear your thoughts on the university funding model. How come it's now unconstitutional if it was supposed to be the equalizer that the government was trying to implement? Suddenly it seems like there's no way forward on it. This back and forth, forming a task force trying to find a solution around it, suddenly things seems to be worse than where we were before even the task force. What are your thoughts about the circles we are in as a country right now?
Sophie, I'll try to be very quick and brief, but allow me also to use the word I think, because my co-panelists are always saying I think, and you're not putting them to task the way you did.
So that we are not
the way you did on a live note. No worries. Again, with the belief that now you have allowed me to say I think again is because this new funding model was concocted politically. And of course, with due respect, that the president has been the major proponent of this particular model. You remember there is even a time that His Excellency the President held a town hall meeting with the university students to discuss this. So it is something that is seen more as more political than it is professional again. But the new funding model, I can tell you, that the idea behind it is very good, because it was, brought to situate that the most vulnerable students get about 95% government funding, that is scholarship plus loan, so that the household was supposed to raise only 5%. So the idea behind it was very good.
But is that the case?
The problem with this new funding model is what we call a banding. So that this particular student that we wanted to help, the most vulnerable student, is now taken to a band or placed in a band where they're supposed to pay 40% for example, instead of the 5%. And that is where the problem with the new funding model is, if you ask me, banding. So that if we would be able to place students in the right bands according to their financial ability, it would work wonders. But now, because it's not working, it has been declared unconstitutional by the court, as you have observed, I think what government should now be doing is to use HELB the way it was doing before, and university fund, in order for students, at least in the interim, because I've heard the CS Education say that they have appealed against this decision by the court. As this happens, we do not want our students to suffer. So in short, it's a good model if the banding is done right. But allow me, Safin, to comment about something that has kept all of us, that is very urgent. Grade 10 next year. This is where we are going to place learners in the pathways, the 3 pathways: STEM, social sciences, arts and sports. By the end of this year, both the teacher, and I like it when some talks about parental engagement, both the teacher and the parent should have been able to assess the child, the learner, to have been able to have established their competency in order for them to place this particular learner in the right pathway. Because if we mess in that, if we place a learner in the pathway that they are not gifted in, then we have wasted that learner. So it's very urgent and important, in my view, that we establish whether schools have engaged parents properly, have been able to identify the competences of learners, because in the next 9 months, of course, we'll be closing our schools for the end of year break, and by the time they open, that is the current grade 9 learners, they will need to be placed in the right pathway. So for me, I think that is most urgent and important.
Maybe
are the parents empowered to empower their learners to make that critical decision?
I think that is the question in the house. I also have grade 9 a student, my last one. I have taken my time to talk to the PS of education about these pathways, because me as a teacher, as a politician, and as an educationist, even myself, I cannot authoritatively advise the students on their pathways, because we have critical issues that have not been addressed. And I had asked the PS that he should take his time on a weekly basis to go to the TV, address the parents, the people, the students, on the kind of pathways and how logically they are going to do this. Because up to now, even our kids do not know those kind of pathways. If you talk to them about STEM, about social sciences, about arts, they will not explicitly explain to you what it means. But why CBC is there as a country is for us to give kids what they want to do in their lives, what they need to do, their ability, their skills, their attitude and knowledge, what they have. But up to now, if grade 9, they are not aware of these pathways, they have not been explained to. The parents are not aware of these pathways. And you all know that most of our parents, the level of literacy, as much as we can talk about literacy, we all know, I would not want to pronounce it, but you know the level of literacy in this country. When you will tell the parent about a pathway, she or he might not understand. So we need to engage the public. And one of the reasons why the funding model was ruled against is public participation. One of the reasons the judges gave out is about public participation. We expect the same with CBC, that we have public participation where parents, teachers, community, and kids are involved. I know time is not there. I would have advised about banding.
Let's seconds for both of you to give your closing remarks. Let me start with you, Grace.
Okay, thank you very much. I still want to emphasize that if the university takes over payment of salaries in public universities, then now you can challenge the universities to deal with other issues. We can be able to see how they also work out to ensure that they take care of other issues that are affecting the universities generally. Salary component is a critical issue that the government must look into to assist universities so that all other deductions can be taken care of, because without that, we are seeing a great crisis in the university where pension schemes are collapsing. Members' third-party deductions in several universities is a big challenge, and this is not good for the sector.
Well said, Grace. Sam?
What I would like to say is that CBC is a great opportunity and it's a great system. But in the initial stages, like it happens with any investment or any business that you want to do, it needs to be very well resourced. And through CBC, we can be able to unlock a lot of the challenges that have bedeviled our education system, including issues to do with equity, but also having a system where there is something for every child. We need to resource it well. We need to do a lot of focus on career guidance, especially for the grade 9 that we have this year, so that next year, when they transition, there is clarity on some of the things that Mheshimiwa has mentioned. Otherwise, it's a system that we need to really support, and we want the government and all the other stakeholders to play their active role in making sure that CBC becomes a success.
All right. Thank you so much, Sam Otieno, the Director, Advocacy and Partnerships at Zizi Afrique, for your time this morning. Grace Nyongesa, Chairperson, Universities Academic Staff Union. Asante. Mheshimiwa John Nyutu, Senator Muranga, chairs the Senate Committee on Education. Thank you. Peter Orero, Member of Parliament, Kibra.
We have not said hi to our constituents, Kibra.
But you're going there right now. He is also sitting at the National Assembly Education Committee. Mheshimiwa wants to send salamu. But thank you so much, Mheshimiwa, for creating time. As we're having this conversation, some 189,000 teachers are scrambling for only 25,000 promotion posts. So, of course, still another dilemma that is facing teachers in the education sector. A conversation that we can only put a comma to. We can never really complete it, but we will be picking it up as we look at state of affairs as these issues continue to develop.